Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Sridhar Kalyanasundram, consultant neonatologist. In this presentation, we will have a look at common skin problems in the neonatal period. I would like to thank Dr. Aditya Rakecha, consultant neonatologist in Abu Dhabi, for his permission to use some of the slides from a presentation he had in the EAP conference a couple of years ago. So, as we are familiar, rashes and birthmarks are quite common in newborns, but even though they are benign, they can be of significant parental concern. And some rashes may need additional workup and treatment. So, we can divide the common skin manifestations into neonatal rash and neonatal birthmarks, and we will discuss with these subheadings. So, there are many transient vascular phenomena that are seen in the neonatal period. They may represent normal newborn physiology, and even though they are transient, they may cause parental concern. One of those is cutis marmorata. This is a reticulated mottling of the skin that symmetrically affects the trunk and the extremities. It's usually caused by a vascular response to a cold environment, and it generally resolves when the skin is warmed. However, it can come back again when you undress the baby and so on. A tendency to having cutis marmorata may persist for several weeks to months, and sometimes into early childhood. There is usually a familial tendency to this. In any case, no treatment is needed. However, remember that this can also be a sign of poor perfusion. So, if the baby is unwell, think of sepsis as an underlying factor. And if there is no obvious explanation and the child is well, you don't need to worry about it. If it is localized in one extremity or it looks very prominent, there is a condition called cutis marmorata telangiectasia congenita where it can persist. So this is a typical mosaic or reticulated pattern, the pink areas alternating with the pale areas. The other vascular phenomenon that we see is a harlequin color change, where you may see that one half of the baby is usually pale and the other half of the baby has gone pink to red. So it is erythema of the dependent side of the body usually and simultaneous blanching of the contralateral side. It's an autonomic phenomenon due to vasomotor changes. The color change develops suddenly and it persists for 30 seconds to even 20 minutes. It's most common during the 2nd to 5th day of life, and it may continue for up to 3 weeks. There is no treatment needed for this as well. In the commonest types of rashes, the erythema toxima neonatorum or erythema toxicum neonatorum will feature. It's an inflammatory disorder of unknown etiology, and the vesicular fluid shows eosinophils. Whether it's an allergic response or whether it is a response to the estrogen withdrawal or the baby's exposure to the environmental factors, nobody knows for sure. But it usually appears by day 1 to 3. Sometimes it's prominent from birth. It's more common in the term babies and very rare to see in the premature. So the more premature the baby, the less likely you are to see erythema toxicum. Usually you get blotchy erythematous macules and patches, often with the central papule, vesicle or pustule. It usually resolves within 4 to 5 days. So here you see the large blotchy erythematous area and the white papules in the middle. Very typical, and it can spread quite a bit around the first 3 days, so parents can be anxious about it. Again, it's very benign, nothing needs to be done. Even though it's angry looking, nothing to worry. There is another condition called transient neonatal pustular melanosis. We'll be discussing pustules later on when we talk of infections. However, we should remember that there is often neonatal pustules related to this, which is totally benign. It doesn't need any treatment. This is a vesiculopustular rash that occurs in 5% of dark-skinned newborns. It's not very common in the white newborns, less than 1% of them. The difference between infection like bullous impetigo or pustulosis is that there is no surrounding erythema. The lesions rupture easily, leaving a colorative scale and a pigmented macule. Many times a baby is born with a lot of skin scaling related to this. Usually fades over 3 to 4 weeks. All areas may be affected, including the palms and soles. So this is a prominent one, and you may get the scaling and the pigmentation related to that as well. Acne neonatorum is also fairly common. It occurs in around 20% of newborns. There are closed comedones on the forehead, nose, and cheeks. These may mimic pustules as well. This lesion usually resolves spontaneously within 4 months. The treatment is generally not indicated. Review the ambient temperature, don't overwrap the baby, and avoid oil application over the affected skin areas. This is acne neonatorum as well. So you get many different comedones. You may get shiny topped papules. You may get pustule-like lesions, and typically the cheeks and the forehead are affected. This starts usually about 10 to 14 days of life and may stay for another 3 to 4 weeks. Milia is small epidermal inclusion cysts, and they are tiny 1 to 2 millimeter purely white or yellow papules. It usually is seen on the forehead, nose, and cheeks, as well as the chin. It can be present at birth or appear thereafter. They disappear spontaneously, usually within the first month, although they may persist into the second or third month. As I discussed before, these cause parental concern, but we have to reassure them that it is benign. So you can get similar ones on the nose and on the cheeks as well. The miliaria is a different one from milia, where it's more like prickly heat. It's due to the superficial eccrine duct closure. That's the same reason why we get prickly heat. It's 1 to 2 millimeter vesicles without the surrounding erythema. It's most common on the head, neck, and trunk. Each vesicle evolves with rupture followed by desquamation, and it may persist for hours to days, and it resolves spontaneously. So you get the purely white small vesicles. So this is usually on the forehead. Avoid overwrapping the baby. Avoid hat unless the baby needs it, and look at the ambient temperature again. Miliaria rubra is often referred to as heat rash. We don't know the exact reason why it happens, but it's usually erythematous papules and vesicles, usually a little more confluent, and it occurs on the covered portions of skin. Avoid excess environmental heat and overdressing again, and cool baths or sponge baths may be helpful. It's usually transient and fleeting, but parents describe it happening very briefly over different parts of the skin, usually over the abdominal wall. So you can see this coming and going. If the skin feels rough, advising a moisturizer on wet skin is useful. However, if the skin texture is normal, you can just monitor it. Cradle cap or seborrheic dermatitis, we still are not sure about the reason. It's overreaction of the sebaceous glands, and whether it's a possible inflammatory response to the fungus Malassezia furfur is one of the underlying reasons why we sometimes use ketoconazole to treat it. It's characterized by erythema as well as greasy scales. It's most common on the scalp and the forehead as well as the eyebrows. Other affected areas may include the face, ears, and neck. Erythema tends to predominate in the flexural folds and the intertriginous areas. Scaling predominates on the scalp. So this is how the cradle cap looks like. So you get flaking, scaling, and seborrheic dermatitis can mimic atopic dermatitis as well. Same areas of the cheeks and the face are affected, and it looks red. But here the shiny papules tend to differentiate. It looks less dry but more shiny. And using moisturizer in excess may not be advisable in seborrheic dermatitis, unlike in atopic dermatitis. So it's important to differentiate. Sometimes these lesions may scale and break. The idea of treatment is to soften this up and gently comb it off. If you leave it and the flakes separate with infection in the bottom, you may see redness spreading. And sometimes you may need anti-inflammatory like steroids to treat it. So conservative and stepwise approach to treatment is warranted. We begin with reassurance and watchful waiting. The scales can often be removed with a soft brush after you shampoo. An emollient like soft white petrolatum may help to soften the scales. Vegetable oil like olive oil has an effect on seborrheic dermatitis, and soaking the scalp overnight and then shampooing may help as well. This can be done over the other involved areas like the eyebrows as well, obviously without affecting the eyes. There are specific products like the Mustela Stillacre, which is applied overnight and washed off with the shampoo the next day. This can be repeated over 3 to 5 day period. And if it persists despite a period of watchful waiting and conservative treatment, as I discussed, several other treatment options exist, including steroids. So white petrolatum applying daily may soften the scales and may facilitate removal with a soft brush. Tar containing shampoos can be used when baby shampoo has failed. It's safe but can be irritating. Ketoconazole is considered because of the role of Malassezia furfur. It comes as a cream or a shampoo and used 3 times weekly. There is no systemic drug levels, but it is a medicated shampoo, so we avoid it unless it's a severe case, and maybe better to leave it to the dermatologist to use it. Hydrocortisone 1% cream as well as co-application with Fusidin may be considered where there is inflammation and areas of redness is spreading. Limit the area used. It does show a good response to it, but don't use it unless it is needed. We also have to think of infectious causes of rash. In babies with vesiculopustular rash who appear sick or have atypical rash, you consider bacterial lesions. Streptococcus and Staphylococcus can both cause impetigo and pustules. Listeria can present with rash, and Pseudomonas infections can present with rash as well. Candida, cutaneous candidiasis, excuse the spelling, and syphilis and viral infections, especially herpes simplex. So it's not uncommon to see pustules like this. A cluster of pustules, this is toxic pustular melanosis. It's more generalized, there is no redness. But sometimes you may get clusters of pustules with redness surrounding it in the neck area or under the groin. If the baby looks well and the lesions are not bullous, topical treatment with the antibacterial like Fusidin should be adequate. But for toxic melanosis, there is no need to give Fusidin or any treatment. Bullous impetigo needs treatment. Often, if it is significant, you may need oral or systemic antibiotics, which cover Staphylococcus. So sometimes it predisposes to staphylococcal scalded skin syndrome. So if the baby presents with the bullous impetigo to start with, and then gets an erythematous skin and excessive crying and irritability, consider the scalded skin syndrome. So neonatal herpes is usually an intrapartum acquisition, most commonly after the primary maternal infection. The mean age at presentation is around 5 to 11 days, and there are 3 main presentations as you're familiar. The skin, eye and mouth, it involves 40% of the cases. If untreated, 70% can disseminate, so don't take it lightly. The disseminated type presents like septicemia. It's seen in 25% of the cases. The skin lesions may be present in up to 60% of these cases as well. And CNS involvement at 35%, and skin lesions are seen in 60% of these. So it's very important to have a high index of suspicion, especially if you have rash localized in a sick baby. And you can send the viral culture, PCR, or direct immunofluorescence from the skin lesions or other sites like conjunctiva, nasopharynx, oropharynx, or the central CSF. It's obviously a very serious condition. It's life-threatening with significant risk of mortality and morbidity, and full evaluation and treatment with high dose of IV acyclovir is needed. So this is how the typical herpetic rash looks like. Obviously, herpes can involve the eyes as well, and that's another area we have to focus on. The maternal history may not be forthcoming, and you may consider testing in such cases. Moving on from rashes to birthmarks. Obviously, birthmarks can be pigmented birthmarks, which are like the traditional moles we talk of. Vascular birthmarks, which are very common, or they may result from abnormal development. So congenital melanocytic nevus looks like this, very typical. It can be fairly large as well. It's a hyperpigmented macules or thin plaques. We may exhibit hypertrichosis in some of these. There is a risk of malignant transformation. It's 2 to 3% if it is small, that is less than 1.5 centimeter, and rarely a risk of malignancy before puberty. The risk increases to 4 to 8% if it is a large lesion. If it is small, you can observe, and depending on the cosmetic reasons, you may consider excision at puberty. If it is large, you can refer for discussing excision early. The giant ones lying on the head or overlying the midline of the back, consider the MRI of the brain or spine, because there may be associated neurocutaneous melanosis, and sometimes there is a risk of seizures in such cases. So dermal melanosis is very benign. It's called Mongolian spots in colloquial terms. There is arrested migration of the melanocytes, which leads to these gray, blue, or green macules and patches. It's most common in the dark skin races and not very common in the white skinned. It's usually affecting the lumbosacral spine and the buttocks, but it can also affect the trunk or extremities. Usually fades spontaneously by 2 years of age. So this is a typical Mongolian blue spot. Sometimes you may get isolated lesions in the extremities as well, which may confuse you with a birthmark, or even a bruise sometimes happening after holding for sampling, maybe mimicking that. Nevus simplex, also called as salmon patch, stork bite, or angel's kiss, it's usually related to the area of superficially dilated capillaries like the forehead, the eyelids, and the nape of the neck. It can be seen in 30 to 40% of the newborn, so you almost expect to see it in all babies, especially the fair-skinned ones. Usually it resolves spontaneously in the first 2 years. So this is an example of a Nevus simplex. The Nevus flammeus, or a port wine stain, is a deeper red stain. It's a vascular malformation of unknown etiology. It's seen in 0.5% of the newborns. It can be permanent. So if it is a large facial lesion involving the trigeminal supply area, cheeks, the eyelids, and so on, think of Sturge-Weber syndrome, where there is a leptomeningeal vessel malformation with tram track appearance on MRI. You may also have glaucoma inside the eye and the risk of retinal detachment. So it's very important to evaluate these kids. If it involves a large area of the extremities or the trunk, we have to think of arteriovenous malformations like crippled Trinone syndrome, where there may be asymmetry of the limbs, the side with the lesion grows bigger, or Proteus syndrome, which is again one of the conditions associated with asymmetry. Pulse dye laser can be used to lighten the lesions if cosmetically needed. We have to refer to the dermatologist early so they can discuss the optimal time of treatment. This is a typical port wine stain in the trigeminal area of the face. A hemangioma occurs in 1.1 to 2.6% of the newborns. It's due to vascular proliferation. It's a type of hamartoma where the normal tissue proliferates. It's not a tumor. It can be clinically unapparent at birth, or there may be just a pink patch on the skin. It can grow over the first few months of life, and it can persist in 10% of the newborns right from early infancy. It tends to involute by 50% by 5 years, 70% by 7 years, and 90% by 10 years. So these are examples of hemangiomas once they have grown. In the evolving phase, they may appear smaller and they may not be raised as well. The hemangiomas needing treatment mainly depends on the location. So this is before and after. A large one next to the nose and the eyes. This is just below the eyes, and if it grows or ulcerates, there is a risk. So we have to treat this as well. And this one is on the lower eyelid. Sometimes I've seen right in the nostril or in the genital area where there is a risk of ulceration. So an ulcerated hemangioma can be quite a difficult problem. So if you see a hemangioma in the scrotum or in the labia of a girl, for example, you have to be very gentle with the skincare, and also we have to treat it early. So the ulcerated hemangioma which has responded and faded. So treatment is indicated if the site is over the eyelids where it can obstruct the vision, close to the nostril where it can block the breathing, genital area where there is a risk of ulceration. Currently, we don't use steroid therapy, which used to be used before, or laser can still be indicated if they don't respond to propranolol. However, the first day of treatment is propranolol therapy. The dose is gradually increasing from 1 to 3 milligram per kilogram per day. A suitable monitoring at initiation and at increments is important as well. There is a good review article which I have quoted here, and the table is taken from that review as well. So we have a dosing protocol suggested by oral suspension produced by dissolving 10 milligram tablet. Because we don't have the suspension, we may have a separate formulation for this to maintain stability. We recommend inpatient monitoring for the first 6 hours to even a half-day stay. The dose should be increased from 1 milligram per kilogram gradually over 2 to 3 milligram per kilogram per day. So here it says 1 week, but sometimes we continue the 2 milligram per kilogram dose for a longer time before we increase to 3 if needed. And the target daily dose is administered as 3 divided doses. The common side effects are bradycardia, hypoglycemia, and hypotension. Because of these, you need an ECG at the start as well. It's not clear here, but obviously we have to monitor the blood sugar, we have to monitor the ECG before starting, consider an echocardiography as well, and observe the baby blood pressure and sugar during the initial few hours of starting and at each repeat. Follow-up is also important, and if the lesion has become static, we can start halving the dose and stop it. It's important to involve the pediatric surgeon as well, because in ulceration can be a complication and they may need to be involved, or if it doesn't respond to treatment, they need to be involved. The next important topic is a sucking blister, which is very common but benign. So it can be seen in 0.5 to 1% of the newborns as shallow erosions or intact bullae. The site gives a clue anywhere where the baby can reach with the mouth, mostly over the hand area where the baby sucks on the wrist or in the finger or on the thumb. There is no treatment, but if it is eroded, you may consider topical treatment. So these are examples. It can suck over here. It can suck again over the lips itself. You may get a blister, and over the corresponding area on the hand. Neurocutaneous markers have to be remembered as well, and Cafella spots can be present in the newborn period, but no need to panic if there are no other signs and no family history. Again, we have to remember ash leaf macule and the association with tuberous sclerosis, especially if we have a newborn presenting with rhabdomyoma, which has been picked up by antenatal scans. Subcutaneous fat necrosis is not uncommon, especially with the babies who have undergone therapeutic hypothermia. So you get lesions under the skin. The skin itself is red and raised, becomes plaque-like. And the main association with this is hypercalcemia. It may persist for some time, so monitor these babies for that. Sometimes it breaks down and it may need plastic surgery review. Very rare, thankfully. So to conclude, there are a wide variety of rash and birthmarks in the neonatal period. It's very important to explain to the parents even if the rash is benign, and you have to refer to the dermatologist as needed. I hope this has been useful. Please share.